Hi, and thank you for tuning into Armstrong Channel 20 and 100. I'm Miss Chrissy, and today we are at Poland Union. We are with Mrs. Flasco and Bonarico's classes. We've chosen two special books from the author of Dr. Seuss and P.D. Eastman. The first one is going to be Flap Your Wings, and the next one is going to be The Best Nest Ever. Let's begin our journey with our reading adventure. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having us here today. We are so excited to be here at Poland Union with this tremendously talented and good-looking bunch of kids. I already have all your eyes. I heard that some of you have actually been talking about insects in your classroom. Is that so? Can I get a nod of head? There we go. So there are all kinds of insects. The neat part about insects is they help our ecosystem. Have you guys heard that word?
No.
It's a really, really, really big word, ecosystem. That means that one thing eats off of another and another and another, and that is a food chain. So let's think about it. If there's a little insect, we'll say a grasshopper. Have you seen grasshoppers outside? Yeah, and they hop about. What are they eating? Go ahead. They're eating the grass, aren't they? Grasshoppers. So there's grass on the bottom. Then there's grasshoppers. Who do you think is going to eat the grasshopper? Go ahead. You don't know? Do you think a cat will? What do you think, sir? A bird. I think so. A bird could definitely eat it. Do you think something else may eat the grasshopper? Yes?
A bunny.
A bunny, you think? What do you think, sir?
Spider.
A spider could. Very good. We have the grass, the grasshopper, then we have a bird on this side. But then we have possibly the grasshopper, and on this side we have a spider. Was somebody you think maybe would be a predator of the bird or a predator of the spider, do you think? Yes. A cat? You're right. A cat would probably bring both of them to the top, right? A cat would probably go after the spider and would probably go after the bird too. So that is our food chain. And sometimes it's a food web, like a spider web. And there's all kinds of different predators, like the word carnivore. Do we know what a carnivore is? Dinosaur lovers. They eat all meat. Then there's something called a herbivore. Yeah, they do. They do not eat any meat. They like to eat just plants. And then there's something in between, and it's called an omnivore. And they eat both meats and plants. So tell me, first grade class, what do you think you are? A person. Yes. Now let's think of us and our food web. Would we be a carnivore that just eats meat? Would we be maybe a herbivore that just eats plants?
No.
So we were probably going to be an omnivore that eats meat and plants, right? Very good. It's a big, big lesson. Lots of big words. So when you're thinking about all your insects and you're doing your study, hopefully we can talk about these books and remember. So we are going to read the first story. And this first story is called Flap Your Wings. It is part of, who's this guy up here? Do we know this guy? Yeah, it's part of Dr. Seuss. And the guy that wrote this is P.D. Eastman. P.D. Eastman, yes. And you can pick it up at your library or the bookstore if you really, really like it. So let's begin our reading journey. Flap your wings. An egg laid in the path. A boy came down the path. He saw the egg. He looked around. He saw flamingos and frogs and turtles and alligators. Whose egg is this? He called. But nobody answered. Then the boy looked up. He saw the empty nest in the tree. Here is an egg without a nest, he said. And there is a nest without an egg. The boy climbed up the tree and he put the egg in the nest. And then he went away. Mr. and Mrs. Bird came home. They were surprised to find an egg in their nest. "That's not our egg," Mrs. Bird said. "Look how big it is." "But it is an egg, and it's in our nest," said Mr. Bird. "And if an egg is in our nest, you sit on it and keep it warm. It doesn't matter whose egg it is." "All right," said Mrs. Bird, "but I wonder what kind of bird will come out of that egg." They took turns keeping the egg warm. First, Mrs. Bird sat on it. Then, Mr. Bird sat on it. And sometimes, because it was so big, they both sat on it. One day, Mrs. Bird heard a squeaking noise. "Help!" she said. "The egg is squeaking!" Squeak, squeak, squeak. Mr. Bird came back to the nest. He listened to the egg. "The egg is not squeaking," he said. "It's our baby that's squeaking. He is ready to come out of the egg." Mr. and Mrs. Bird waited. And the egg started to crack. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Squeak, scratch, scrack, crackle. Then it cracked, and some more. And then there was the baby. Mr. Bird was so very excited. "It's Junior," he shouted. "What a beautiful baby. Look what's in that nest." Oh my goodness. I don't know if that maybe be the right egg. What do you think? Let's check and see. Junior opened his mouth. It was a big mouth. It was full of teeth. "That's the funniest looking baby bird I have ever saw," said Mrs. Bird. "Something is wrong. I think he's our baby at all. I don't think he's our baby at all." "He's in our nest, so he must be ours," said Mr. Bird. "His mouth is open. That means he's hungry. And when your baby's hungry, you feed him." Mr. and Mrs. Bird went away to get some food for Junior. Mr. Bird brought a pink worm. Mr. Bird brought a green one. Junior ate both worms in one big gulp. Then he opened his mouth wide again. "We have to get Junior lots more to eat," said Mr. and Mrs. Bird. "Do you think that would fill the alligator's belly up? 2 worms? Do you think? I think he's probably still hungry." So, hour after hour and day after day, they brought food for Junior. Mrs. Bird got berries and cherries. She got butterflies and caterpillars. She got dragonflies and mosquitoes. She got ladybugs and tiger beetles. Mr. Bird got crickets and spiders. He got grasshoppers and snails. He got red ants. He got black ants. He got centipedes too. "What kind of bird eats so much?" said Mrs. Bird. "It doesn't matter," said Mr. Bird. "He's still hungry, and we have to feed him." Weeks went by. Junior never stopped eating, and he never stopped growing. He grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, Junior got so big that Mr. Bird said, "It's too crowded up here. Junior has to leave the nest. It's time for him to fly away." "You're right," said Mrs. Bird. "The time has come. We must show him how to fly." Mrs. Bird pushed and pushed, and Mr. Bird showed Junior how to fly. "Jump into the air like this," he said, "then flap your wings." Junior got ready. He took a deep breath. He jumped up, up into the air he went. Flap your wings, yelled Mrs. Bird. Flap your wings, yelled Mr. Bird. And Junior flapped and flapped, but it didn't go very well. But it didn't do any good. He didn't have any wings. Down, down, down went Junior. Down in the water, and the sound was? Splash. Splash, very good. It was cold and wet in the water. It was just right for Junior. You know, said Mrs. Bird, I don't think Junior was a bird at all. It doesn't matter, Mr. Bird said. He's happy now. And just look at him swim. The end. So what did we find out? An egg isn't always a bird's egg, is it? No. In this case, this egg became a alligator. And not a bird at all, even though it was in a bird's nest. And the mama bird and the daddy bird, they kept it warm so it could crack and wiggle and shake and come out. But they even tried to teach him how to fly, but that didn't go so good, did it? No. Because the alligator didn't have what? Wings. He didn't have wings. So he learned how to swim in that cold water instead, right? That was his instinct to do. How was that story? Good. Good. All right, we did a blue one. We are going to do a pink one. Yeah, look at that. This one is called The Best Nest. Do you have this book? This one is also about birds. And this one is also by Dr. Seuss. Yes, it is. And it's by P.D. Eastman. So let's begin this story. The Best Nest. Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, the nest is best. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It's not the best nest, she said. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now. So they left the old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mrs. Bird. Let's move in here. Uh-oh. But somebody else has already moved in. It was who? It was the raccoon. So they looked for another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. That's right. You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. It belongs to a foot. A person's foot, probably, right? I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea? What's going to happen? Oh, my goodness. But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. What's going in there? Mail. The mail going in the mailbox. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house. And here it is, right here. They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big? Asked Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First, they got some hay. Did you see it? See the barrels of hay? It does look like hair, huh? But that's hay. Barrels of hay on the farm. And they're pulling one strand out at a time. They got some soda straws and some broom straws. They even got some sweater string. They got some stocking string and some mattress stuffing. They got some horsehair. They got some man hair. Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horsehair, and all the man hair they could carry. They took it all back to build their nest. Mr. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their work. "This nest is really the best," said Mrs. Bird. "I want to stay here forever." Mr. Bird was very happy too. He flew to the top of his house. He sang his song again. "I love our house, I love our nest. In all the world, the nest is best." So, he was so busy singing that he did not even see Mr. Parker coming. Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull the rope. The rope went way up to the bird's new nest. The rope rang, the big, big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Bong, bong, bong. Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could, as it sounded bong, 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 bong. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horse's hair and man's hair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? "I will look for her until I find her," said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. He looked down into the chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. He looked down in the water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Then he saw a big fat cat. There was a big fat smile on the fat cat's face. There were some pretty brown feathers near the fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. "Oh dear," he cried. "This big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird." Mr. Bird flew off. "I'll never see Mrs. Bird again," he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder. Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. What do you think? Do you think it may be a tree? It was his old house. That old house that Mrs. Bird hated. "I'll go inside," said Mr. Bird. "I'll rest here until the rain stops." Do you think? Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. sitting there singing, "I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, the nest is best." "You here?" gasped Mr. Bird. "Well, I thought you hated this old nest." Mrs. Bird smiled. "I used to hate it," she said, "but a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there is no nest like the old nest for a brand new bird." There is a blue egg. And when the egg popped open, the new bird thought so too. So some of you actually paid attention. There was a blue egg in there. Do we know what kind of real bird that's outside that has a blue egg? Yes.
A robin.
A robin does, yes. And that robin, does he stay here in the winter? Do you get to see him in the winter? No, he migrates, huh? Or she migrates. They have to go to a little warmer climate because they can't put on jackets and boots and hats and mittens during the winter seasons and the cold seasons. But also when spring comes back, we listen for the sweet bird sounds, don't we? Have you noticed in the morning how that's changed?
Yes.
Some have, some haven't. So the ones that haven't, I challenge you in the morning tomorrow, when you get up really early, listen. See if you hear any birds chirping. See if it's quiet or quieter than it was when the weather was a little warmer and you were able to wear shorts and no jackets. And see what you hear. For the meantime, we are going to go over to the tables and I'll let you know we're going to do a craft. And it's going to be to give our little furry friends, our feathered friends, something to eat. Since the insects aren't as often found in the cold weather, right? Tying in with our books about our feathered friends and the season that they are about to go in, we are making a craft with basic materials that you can find right in your own kitchen and expense-free. We started with just some regular bird seed. You can either use some peanut butter or also some lard. Crisco would be fine. We have some plastic utensils and some paper plates that you can go ahead and use. What you're going to do is tuning in to watch the children begin their crafting experience to feed our feathered friends. Let's think of what birds we'll see come to this little bird feeder. Yes, would you like to take a guess? Go ahead. A robin, do you think? Have we seen any robins outside?
No.
We haven't. I've missed seeing those robins outside because they sing such a pretty song in the morning. Yes, sir.
A crow.
Do you think a crow? Maybe, because they stick around, don't they? How about you, sir?
A blue jay.
A blue jay. They have a funny squawk, don't they? They do. And they're very territorial. They're kind of mean. They kind of scatter the other little birds like the black headed chickadees or the sparrows. They kind of say, get, because I want to eat all that food. Maybe like a big brother or sister sometimes do, huh? So we are going to see cardinals. It's our Ohio State bird, but they can't put on jackets, so that's why we're gonna now start this craft. Go ahead and put your plate down flat and put your spoon or your knife or your fork on top of the plate. Now, what we're going to do before we even begin our adventures, we're going to go ahead, thank you. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to bring this box of markers around. And what I'd like you to do is actually now put your utensil on the side, flip your plate over, and we're gonna write our name on this, okay? And now what I'm gonna do is we are actually going to take our spoon and we're going to patiently wait for our friends to take just a small section of your spoon with this white stuff. This white stuff is not butter, but it is filled with fat. And the reason why we're going to use the fat is it's going to coat some warmth with our feathered friends outside. So you're gonna spread it out. Now you wanna keep it, see that white circle? You wanna keep it within the white circle. So the white Crisco stays within the white circle. You're gonna go ahead and you're gonna put all of that on. If you are finished, you may put your spoon in the container, this little container. If you don't have this container, you may also put it back on your plate that had the Crisco when you are done. When you are all done. Once you actually have your spoons or your knives, so your utensils, you may take your scissors, one scissor. Now there is yarn in the center. This stuff, actually, the birdies, do you remember in our story? They use this kind of stuff to actually build and weave in their nests. So we're gonna add it and maybe make some colorful nests. We'll look for them. Hi, and thank you for tuning in to Armstrong Channel 20 and 100. We are here today at Poland Union, and we just got done with our very fun craft that you can also do at home. It's going to help our wonderful birds and feathered friends outside stay warm over the winter months. Hope to see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.